Chevre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong and happy physically and spiritually. As usual in the last couple of months, we'll start with Tzedakah, Gdel Tzedakah, Shemakarev Sagula. Mashiach should come now. The war should be over. All the hasses should return. And it should just be like Yehudim Ma'isa V'Simcha V'Sasam V'Ikar Kein Ti Alonu. We'll also mention a prayer, and this is the bracha, one of the brachas that we say we're going to read the Megillah from this Motzei Shabbos and Sunday morning. Baruch Atah Hashem Melikeinu Melech Haolam Sha'asa Nisim L'Avoseinu Bayamim Ohem Bizman Hazeh. We are thanking Hashem that He made miracles for our forefathers in those days at this time. So too He should make miracles for Am Yisrael right now. In general, when it comes to the Megillah, I'm sure we mentioned this before, there's a famous Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. So today's lesson is a lesson for Parshas Vayikra. It's a lesson for the festival of Purim. And also this Shabbos is Shabbos Zocher. We read about Amalek, and now we have to wipe out Amalek. So what is the connection between all these three things? So concerning the Megillah, everyone knows there's a famous Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, Mamish HaMoed Dikapshat, Kol HaKoyres HaMegillah Mefreya. Whoever reads the Megillah says that backwards, out of sequence, is Lo Yotza, he's not Yotza. In other words, because since the whole miracle has to do with a certain chronological sequential order, and every single detail follows in perfect order, so if you read it backwards, you're not going to really be able to appreciate the miracle. When you read every single detail, here he killed, Achashverosh kills his wife because of a minister. And then there's this Balayla Nandashnas HaMelech, and Mordechai saved Achashverosh's life. And whatever, every single detail has to be in sequence, etc., etc. And how Esther becomes the queen. The Baal Shem Tov said that what is the meaning of Kol HaKoyres HaMegillah Mefreya? Lo Yotza. If somebody reads the Megillah and he says Lo Mefreya, it's a nice story that happened many, many, many years ago, but it has no relevance to my life right now. Lo Yotza, you missed the whole point. You have to listen closely to the story of the Megillah and take the lessons, what you meant to learn from it, and internalize it. Make it premius, and see how it makes a very big difference in your life. So this was said concerning the Megillah Esther on these words of the Maimon Azal, Kol HaKoyres HaMegillah Mefreya Lo Yotza. This applies to every single Yontif. And every single Inyan in Yiddishkeit only gets stronger, more powerful, and we have to think about it even more deeper. But the fact that we learn it out from this Kol HaKoyres HaMegillah Mefreya Lo Yotza seems to imply that especially when it comes to the Megillah, we have to meditate and think about this idea of the message of the Megillah and how it applies, and it's relevant right now. And we have to take a lesson. We'll speak about one lesson today. Now, on Parshas Vayikra, we're starting a new sefer, and it talks about Kabbonis. And the Parsha spoke about different Kabbonis, speaks about different Kabbonis, and it mentions first, in Kohen HaMashiach Yechta, if the high priest, the Kohen HaMashiach, is going to do an Aveda, do something wrong, unintentionally. And then it says, Vim Kol Adas Yisrael Yishku, if all of the community is going to do something wrong unintentionally. And what that's talking about is when the Sanhedrin made a ruling which was a mistake, and everybody did the right thing. They listened to the Sanhedrin, but what the Sanhedrin said was the wrong thing. They made a mistake. And it also says, Vim Nefesh Achas Sechta. But over here, when it comes to a Nasi, the pasuk says, Asher Nasi Yechta. When a ruler sins, and it goes on the Melech, the king. So the question is, why does it say Asher Nasi Yechta, Asher, when every other place it said Im? By the way, I'm saying a Sikha of the Rebbe, Vayikra, Chelik Yud Zayin, the 5th Sikha. There's a lot more to what I'm going to say in the Sikha printed. I'm just going to speak one point, but it's mighty dika Sikha. A lot more than what I'm saying. Anyway, so Rashi says, Asher Nosi Yechto Loshen Asher. Why does it say Asher? The word Asher over here, instead of every other place where it said im, if. So it could have said over here, Asher Nosi Yechto, if the Nosi will sin. Why did it say Asher? Which means to say when, not if but when, but that's another interpretation. But over here it says, we're translating it as if. So why does it say Asher? So Rashi says, Loshen Asher, Asher Ader, fortunate is the generation, Shanosi Shaloi, Noisim Leiv, Lohavi Kapar al Sheyigosei, that the ruler sets his heart to bring an atonement for his unintentional sin. Kal v'chemer, all the more so, Shemescharet al Zdei Nesav, that he has regrets over his intentional sins. So here the Rebbe asks a couple of klotz kashas on this. First of all, this Maimer Azal really comes, this thing that says, Ashrei Hader, that Shanosi Shaloi brings a korban, a sacrifice to atone for his unintentional sin, is a Gemara in Hoirius, Daf Yuram and Beis, and over there the Loshen is a different Loshen. It says, Asher Nosi Yechte, Omer Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai said, Ashrei Hader, it says Asher Hader, fortunate generation, Shanosi Shaloi Mevi Korban Al Sheyigosei, that the Nasi brings a korban on his shegig, and then it says at the tzorach leimer mao hedyet. So if the Nasi has to bring a korban, and we see that he has to atone for his sin, sure, all the more so when it comes to a commoner. So the question is, why does Rashi change the wording from the Gemara? That over there it says, Im Nasi Shaloi Mevi Korban. That's what the Gemara says. But over here it says that he's nice and leiv. Lohavi Kapara. Why does Rashi make that difference? The Rebbe also asks, why is it Asher Hader? L'chayra, it's more about the leader. It's a statement about the leader. That he's an honest person. And even though this could be a Pashto Pshat, by the way, that a leader, a man of integrity, and if he's a leader, it means because he's worthy of being a leader. So sometimes you might have a dilemma. You did something wrong, and by admitting that you did something wrong, that could jeopardize your position. You might say, cover that Torah, cover the office. It's not about me, it's about my position, my authority. And if I'm going to show that I'm fallible, so then people are going to say, just like he makes a mistake like this happened on Monday, Tuesday could be something else. Because he's not perfect. You see, look, he made a mistake. And he might say that's going to jeopardize my whole position, weaken my whole position, and if I won't be able to lead properly, because they'll see that I have these problems. So therefore, we say, no, that this is a lesson for leaders. They have to realize the truth is the truth is the truth. Nothing bad will come out of the truth. And on the contrary, they have to see that you're man enough, you're great enough to be able to admit that you made a mistake. Shiva dvarim b'chacham u'moida ala emes. We have to see that you're a man of truth. And even by Moshe Rabbeinu in the story of B'tzalel, what comes first, the kelim or the bias, so to speak, the structure? Moshe Rabbeinu told B'tzalel, you're right. Whatever the story is over there in the explanation. I'm just bringing out the point that we see that whenever there was a question that maybe we didn't get it right for whatever the explanation shouldn't be, then you have to say, Umayda ala emes. And that's the lesson over here. But why is it Ashrei Hader? What does that mean? Okay, so the Rebbe learns a Moed Pshat, ubehemshech to another issue. And that is, the Rebbe explains that the word Asher, because Asher is like because that. In other words, there's another question over here. The Rebbe is saying that Rashi is bavornik. And the question is, the korban that came just before was the communal sin offering. And the question is, why does the whole Adas Yisrael have to bring this korban after it wasn't their fault at all. They were following orders. They were following instructions. From who? From the Sanhedrin. So why is it considered that the community, has to bring a korban? So it's a question. So therefore, the Rebbe explains, that's why afterwards comes this pasuk to teach us that, guess what? That even if you're a king, but if you make a mistake, you have to bring a korban. What's the difference if the mistake was because the Sanhedrin said something wrong and you followed their instructions, even though you were meant to follow their instructions, but through you, something which was not right happened. And therefore we see even someone like the Nasi, who could have this problem, like we said before, that he might even have a doubt whether he should do such a thing because it might jeopardize his whole future leadership. Nevertheless, he has to bring a korban. That's one part of why this pasuk comes afterwards and why it says Asher. But what's the main point? And this is the chiddush of the Rebbe over here that's unbelievable. That the message, this is like the antidote. What's the antidote? The antidote that such a thing should not happen again in general. The idea of a mistake and how much you have to take it to be like on guard. So therefore you'll double check, like even in the case with the Sanhedrin, maybe you'll double check. Is that what they said? Is that what? But in general, the lesson of the leader to prevent mistakes. This is what Rashi means over here when Rashi says, "Shanosi shaloi noisen leiv." Rashi is stressing that the chiddush over here is not the fact that he just brought a korban, the Nasi, because of course he brought a korban. Because when there's a mistake, when there's a shogeg, you have to bring a korban. Whatever the explanation is, and the Rebbe explains of the Sikha, in the Sikha, that when a shogeg happens, that means it has some connection to you. That itself is the message. That there's some connection to that act. There's some connection to something which is against Hashem, and therefore you're not 100% pure. You're not 100% innocent, so to speak. You are such a being, such an entity, that a mistake could come about through you. And that's why you have to take it very serious when even you commit a shogeg, inadvertently and unwillingly. But nevertheless, you have to bring a korban. But the word is not that the fact that he brought a korban. That's not the point. The point is noisen leiv, that he was crushed, that he was decimated, that it bothered him, that he was very upset. And when the followers, when the nation saw how much it bothered the Nasi, the fact that he did something wrong, so that automatically brought the rest of the nation not to do such a thing in the first place. Because they saw, wow, look what kind of difference it made to him. And he's in pretty good shape. But nevertheless, it bothered him so much. So even if a person like that is bothered by something like that, something which is a shogeg, I should for surely be careful about such things, because I have a lot of other things that I have to worry about, so to speak. So I should try to be extra careful not to add to any of things. We see how much he took it seriously. It must be a very serious thing. And this is how the Rebbe answers, Ashrei Hadoir. Why is it Ashrei Hadoir? Because the fact that the leader shows that level of how much it bothered him, so therefore it has an impact and it influences the whole Dor. Everyone who's under his leadership. So that answers all the questions. And from this we see it's about life in general. I mean, just to give an example, but it's not mamish such a good example. Imagine you embarrass somebody. You embarrass somebody. Just to bring it down in a way that we can relate to. Imagine you embarrass somebody or you hurt somebody's feelings. Oh, you hurt somebody's feelings. Or you embarrassed them unwillingly. It was like, today we have a super sensitive generation. People say, I'm offended. Okay. But let's take this seriously for a second. So, you said something. I speak from my own experience, we fabring in yeshiva sometimes, or we give a shir. Sometimes you make a joke. But you don't realize that not everyone has thick skin. Some students have, have thicker skin. Some students have thin skin. You have to know what you're dealing with. By the way, usually when I bring with the Bachrim, I want to make it more close to break the ice and to break barriers. So I'll address, them individually. Hello, Rosenkrantz, Weinstein, Goldstein, and say something. But sometimes you have a Bacher who comes over to me, after the Farbrengen, and I'll say, Rabbi Winner, from now on I want to ask you a request. Never mention my name in public. Okay? And I know that this person is more the sensitive sort. Now, by the way, there are other Bachrim that love it. They love the attention. They love when you have this sort of banter with them, joke around. They enjoy it. But then you have another sort of student that doesn't enjoy it. Anyways, imagine I said something, or somebody said something to a student, and you realize the student became visibly upset. So there's one svara, one side of you says, you know what, I can wait till tomorrow before I'm going to ask him for forgiveness. But then it could be another thing. Sometimes you say, no, don't even wait till tomorrow. You shouldn't go to sleep at night thinking that you saw the way he was upset and you just go further. It can't be like that. You, whoever you are that caused this to another person, should also be thinking to himself, if you're a sensitive person, if you're a person that lives with ethics, you should be thinking to yourself, I don't want a night to go by that person should feel hurt because of something that I did, even though I didn't do it intentionally. So I'm saying the same things over here. If this is a Nasi, and Ruchnis is what's Negeya, and a Lakus is Negeya, godliness, so the fact that something not right, something is wrong in the universe, something not right happened through him, so he has to fix it. And this is what it means over here, Nisan Leiv. It's not only the fact that he brought the carbon. It was something that it was obvious in an evident manner by looking at this Nasi that he was upset about it. And this is what causes the most impact by his followers. So we're talking about the passion, the emotion. And the same thing is, by the way, when it comes to teaching, especially, let's say, for example, if someone would ask, what's the most important thing in teaching? I would say you should be excited about the material. If you're very passionate and excited about the material, so that will make the most deepest impact on the students. It's not only about how well you explain it. It's the passion that's involved. And they'll never forget it, like, wow, this rabbi, he was going wild. He went to town when he spoke about this subject. And this is what Rashi means over here when Rashi says, Noisen Leiv. That's the main chidush. And it's the Noisen Leiv that prevents the whole generation from committing Avedas B'Shegig. Okay, now let's talk about the Megillah. There's a Moedik word from the Friedrich Rebbe about Mordechai. In Kapitel Dalet of the Megillah, it starts off and it says that Mordechai Yoda es kolosh nasa Vayikra Mordechai es begodov vayubash sak ve'efe vayetzi b'teichir vayizak zooko gdeilo mora. Mordechai knew everything that had happened. He found out about this decree of annihilation of the entire Jewish nation. Mordechai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out through the city crying a loud and bitter cry. So first of all, we see right over here, Mordechai's reaction is very extreme, even though he knew from the 3 children and the famous Medrash, which I don't want to get into right now, that it's going to be good, but he wanted to bring the Yidden to tshuva, so therefore, this is what he did. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes. You can imagine, the biggest tzaddik of his generation is walking around with sackcloth and ashes. Shock! So it had an impact. And then he went out through the city crying a loud and bitter cry. And then it says, Esther found out about it, his cousin, and she wanted to find out she sent Hasoch, what's going on over here? Why are you doing this? So then Hasoch went to look for Mordechai. Vayagid le Mordechai Eis kol asher karohu. Mordechai told over everything that had happened to him and about the whole decree and how Haman had brought off the king, etc. So it says over here about the decree that this is something that happened to him. Then later on, in the Megillah, after Haman walked Mordechai with the horse and everything, Vayisaper Haman lezeres ishtei lechol evav eis kol asher karo, everything that happened to him, and they told him this is a sign that it's bad news for you. So the Friedrich Rebbe points out a moiridika word. And I'm going to read it to you from inside, and I would like you yourselves, if you have a Sefer HaSichos, Tafshin Hey, that's talks of the Friedrich Rebbe of 1945, Purim, and page 77 in Sefer HaSichos, Tafshin Hey. Sorry. Oy. Hold on a second. Page 73. Sefer HaSichos, Tafshin Hey, page 73. There's Meirik Oasis over here, but you look it up yourself where he speaks about Avos Yisrael and how it has to be V'neflinu. We have to be distinguished in our Avos Yisrael. But over here he says a word, the contrast between the karo of Mordechai and the karo of Haman. And that one brought the other. That's an amazing. It says in the Megillah, the same expression, I'm reading from inside, page 73, Ois Vav. It says the same expression in the Megillah about by Haman and by Mordechai, even though they're two opposites. By Mordechai it says Ashakaro, and by Haman it says Ashakaro. And he says Mordechai had Tzaddik, who was the Rosh Sanhedrin. So, and he was Yeshem B'Shara Melech. So he was a rich person. And after he screamed the whole scream, he said that all this was because of the decree, gleich wie es wird mit ihm getroffen, wie es wird mit ihm allein passiert. And he says, when der Ashakaro hat gebracht, Haman's Ashakaro. Which means that, and the Rebbe once spoke about this by Farbrengen, the truth is, Mordechai didn't have to worry about himself at all. First of all, he's a cousin of the queen. So even if there was a decree, Esther would make sure that Haman would not get harmed. Second of all, he was a member of the parliament, Yeshem B'Shana Melech. Third of all, he could have called in that favor that he saved the king's life. So therefore, there's no way that anything would have ever happened to Mordechai. But nevertheless, he experienced this whole thing as if it was happening to him. That's what it means, Ashakaro. Karo. By Haman, when he says Ashkaro, it's talking about something that happened to him. Not that it's about anyone else. But by Mordechai, it was something that was happening. It was about the nation. But he took it personally, completely, even though he was the least of anybody who had to worry about such a thing. And then the Friedrich Rebbe says, As es trefft Chalila bei Iden a schlechte Sach. If something bad happens to another person, darf sein gleich wie das Wort bei ihm allein getroffen. You have to feel the pain of another, as if it's happening to you. Nicht nur der Mishtatev sein sich bezach Averei. Not only do you share the pain, and you take a part in it, nor gleich wie bei ihm hat das passiert, but just as if it was happening to you. It's not so easy, but at least we have the aspiration. And that's what it means, Ashakaro, by Mordechai. And the Friedrich Rebbe says the same thing is about if something good is happening. When there's a tzar of Yechaver, when there's pain, somebody's going through a tragedy, God forbid, or suffering, so then you have to feel it. Ima yonoichi b'tzara. And the same thing is true when it comes to a joy, when it comes to a simcha. It's not only like it's your brother's simcha, of course it's like your brother's, but it's like your thing. You're going through the pain, and you're feeling the joy. So that's the lesson. But the powerful thing is, besides for the fact that the Friedrich Rebbe says this is how you're supposed to be, he says it was that feeling of Achdus, Mordechai's karo, that brought about Haman's karo, that he had his downfall. So we see the direct correlation. The Friedrich Rebbe says, That's our Avos Yisrael, our Achdus, Yachad Natseach, will bring down the enemy. And the same thing is Pasha Zocher. Everyone knows the famous Vort in Chassidus. The pasuk says, "Ashakorcha baderech," that Amalek encountered you, happened upon you on the way. And Chassidus elaborates that the word korcha comes from kar, coldness. That what's the trait of Amalek? He says, "What are you getting so excited about it? He saw miracles. Don't worry, I could still stay the same. I don't have to change." He says, "Don't care." And this is a famous line from Eli Wiesel. Everyone knows this, a famous quote. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And he goes on to say a couple of things. The opposite of this and the opposite of that is all indifference. Why? Because indifference, that Rebbe also speaks about in a couple of places, in the Kutei Sichos, that when you go Mivtzoyim and the person gets angry, that's at least a reaction. It's something to work with. But when the person's indifferent, there's no hazozah, there's no sign of life. And the same thing is in general. The reason why the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference, is because when the person's indifference, he thinks, I'm neutral, I don't want to get involved, he's not bad. There's no hope. There's no hope. When a person has a feeling of hate, so then you can deal with it. You can deal with this person. You can get into an argument. You could try to win it over. You could try to transform it. But if it's indifferent, and that's what Amalek is, and we know there's the Yom Yom that says zwischen Kelt and Kfire da Dina Mechitza, that's the Yom Yom of Tez Zayin Shvat, if I remember correctly, and between coldness and heresy is a slight barrier. It starts with coldness. Amalek comes along and says, don't get excited, just mitzvahs hanoshim elamada, do it dry, do it plain, do it mechanical, etc., etc. And we say no. The way, and Amalek is the worst midah. Reishis goyim Amalek v'acharisi adei oived. This is something which has to be uprooted completely. And we have to see it in ourselves. Somebody says, you know what, relax, relax, relax. And this is the war that we have to fight against, which is, you have to be on fire. A chosid is a shtik fire. You have to be on fire. Nayim Yem over there in Tez Zayin Shvat, he says, Lernen und daven mit a bread. You have to learn and daven with a fire, with a passion, with an excitement. And by the way, this is getting back to the first thing, but that Ashrei Hador, that the Nasi, Nisan Leiv, he put his heart into it. So the same thing you see by the Rebbe, and you see also by Mivtzoyim. There's so many stories where the Rebbe would write to somebody in a letter, Mohir, which means, special express. And the Rebbe would say, I'm sending this letter special express so that one night shouldn't pass. They should have this sort of question in your mind or this sort of doubt. And the same thing is there's stories and stories about how there's a businessman who's on a trip, and there was one famous story, he was going back to London and he met somebody in another state in the United States, and he was in the United States by the Rebbe in New York. He told the Rebbe that he's taking a flight tonight, but next time he comes, he's going to bring this other Jew, I don't know which state he was in, maybe Detroit, he'll bring him a pair of tefillin. And then the Rebbe answered him, you going to London? Before you got that person a pair of tefillin? And this was like insane, because he had to get a flight that night, and then he had to go buy a pair of tefillin, and he only had a couple hours to do that and get it to that other state. So, but the story was he ended up doing that. And the point is, because how could one day go by that he shouldn't put on tefillin? And then obviously that person put on tefillin for the rest of his life, that other person who was in Detroit, I think. Why? Because that itself made the impression. Like the Rebbe explains over here about the Nisan Leiv. When you see how it's so important that you go so much out of your way to make sure that person should not pass one day anymore for the rest of his life, putting on tefillin, then he'll put on tefillin. Like, it's so important how you impress upon the other person. And what we realize from that sikha about Nisan Leiv, it's that it's your reaction, your emotional reaction, which leaves the most powerful impression. So this is the lesson I would take from Parshas Vayikra, that Rashi, Nisan Leiv, Nisan Liboy. And this is the story of Mordechai Shakaro. He was a leader. And because he was a leader, everything that was going on by the others, by the rest of the nation, was like it's happening to him personally. And the same thing is about a mullik. The way to fight a mullik is to remember that it's so easy to just be indifferent. It's so easy to say, I want to be neutral. It's so easy to say, I don't want to get involved. It's so easy to say, I want to be a bystander. And by the way, this is right now going on. Baruch Hashem, the good news is we see a lot of people that were disassociated and alienated from Yiddishkeit and were completely secular, but they've decided that we have to take a stand right now, after what happened in October 7th. And this is the Hira, the lesson that we have to take from Mordechai and fighting Amalek in Pasha Vayikra. Every one of us should take a stand about things that are going on in our Dalet Amis that might be wrong. And I see it also all the time. There's different situations that happen. And, everybody is, let's not try to make anybody upset. Of course, the main thing is obviously Shirol. But you must take a stand. And you must show passion about something which is sometimes just a shaygig. Just, Chas v'Shalom, I'm calling it. And they should help. That we should work on our obviously Shirol, to take part in another person's joy, not only take part, but act as if work on it, so it should be like it's my joy. And the same thing if something, chas v'shalom, there's any pain or suffering by another yid, we have to project and emanate that we're in this all together, and the Eibush should help, that it should be like we started today's shir, sha'oso nisim la'veiseinu, b'yom ha'mehem b'zman hazeh, b'gula mitzvah shleima, take it from Yad Mamish, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisborach, your man in Melbourne.